It might feel like a long time ago.
This is the dawn of a new era.
But yes, the UK left the EU in January of 2020.
The United Kingdom's membership in the European Union is over.
It's been out of the headlines for a few months now, but Brexit is back on the political menu. So here's a quick refresher of what's done and what's still to do. The divorce deal, known as the withdrawal agreement, dealt with the rights of EU citizens living here, how much money the UK owed the EU, and the transition period, which we're currently in, during which, you'll have noticed, nothing much has changed.
But what we need now is to see a bit of oomph in the negotiations.
So what's on the table now is how the UK and the EU will trade with each other in future. Both sides want a free trade agreement, meaning there'd be no charges or tariffs on goods bought and sold between the UK and the EU, and no limits or quotas on the amount of stuff crossing the border. Working out the details of that is where things get tricky.
You cannot have the best of both worlds.
The UK says the EU is asking for too much, and that now that it's left the EU, it shouldn't have to follow EU rules in order to trade.
We will be in control.
But that is important to the EU because they say it ensures fair competition between companies on both sides. They call that the level playing field.
It is looking to pick and choose the most attractive element of the single market without the obligations.
Fishing is another sticking point. The UK wants to sell fish caught by British boats into Europe, but in return, the EU wants its vessels to have access to UK waters.
The UK continues to backtrack.
Deadlines and deadlock might feel familiar, but the pressure is definitely back on.
I think the people in this country are heartily sick of going on about Brexit.
COVID restrictions permitting, this summer's negotiating timetable is tight.
Time is short.
And what happens if a deal is done, but the rules are broken? The EU says its highest court, the European Court of Justice, must have a say. But the UK is clear it can have no role here.
But we can't have the involvement of the European Court of Justice in this country.
So there's a lot to overcome. Negotiations are happening remotely, which doesn't exactly help. And while both sides say they do want a deal, they're also preparing for a future without one.
The window of opportunity is rapidly closing.
The deadline is December the 31st. And both sides will have to budge somewhere, somehow, if a deal is to be done.